back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me once again, it's Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You know, it was kind of business as usual for the Flyers, and we'll get into that in just a second. Before we do that, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Find us everywhere, including sportstalkphilly.com. All right, so the Flyers went 1-2 this week. I guess technically, more correctly, they went 1-1-1 because Carter Hart stole you a point in Vegas.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, but the week started with, quite frankly, a really fun game.
Yes and no. And I say yes and no because, and I it's funny, I was talking to a buddy last night who kind of last minute decision said, I went down on Monday night, did the assembly room tickets, and said I went down because they were playing, it was Colorado. And Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon.
Wow.
And I said, and you got 4 whole minutes of Nathan MacKinnon. You know, that team, like, if
the Flyers have been hurting people this year.
Kind of, but not like, you know what? That team already, like,
they're the walking wounded, I know.
Right. And we just had this conversation not long ago. Like, if you're the type of person at this point who sits there and says, you know, like, the beauty of the NHL schedule is every team comes to your town once a year.
Yep. You get to see all your superstars.
If you got up for Nathan MacKinnon's coming, Cale Makar's coming, it's the defending Stanley Cup champions, you kind of got gypped out of that, not just because MacKinnon left, but they were hurting badly. I mean,
right.
No Val Nichushkin, Arturi Lehkonen got hurt right before. It's not that because they were on a regular, like, the goaltending was the kind of business as usual. They didn't start. I guess they've been starting Francouz more than they've been starting Georgiev. So Georgiev got the start that night for whatever, not for whatever reason. I guess the reason being it's the Flyers. I mean, look at how Vegas handled that too. Vegas didn't start their number one for most of the year.
And the Flyers are toward the bottom of the standings, and we expect to see a lot of backups.
Sure.
That's how it works.
Totally fair. But they were missing guys, and it's not the same team as last year either, obviously, because all of a sudden, like, those injuries look bigger when there's no Nazem Kadri, there's no Andre Burakovsky anymore. Like, they had to make their decisions based on who they wanted to keep. They've got great players, and don't get me wrong, like, you got flashes of it. Like, Makar had some moments.
Did you see how much time he played on Monday?
He had already played over 20 minutes through 2 periods, and I said that's
28:53. The kid is a horse.
Then I'm going to tell you right now, though, then they pulled back his minutes at the end.
Probably.
Because he was over 20 already going to the third, I think.
And they probably went, whoa, that's a lot of time for a Monday night regular season game against the Flyers.
It's not that was what it was. They got halfway through the third period and you're trailing 4-1, and it kind of became obvious that it was like, all right. Flyers are winning this game.
Let's stable the horses.
Well, not only that, but I think that with Makar, especially with Makar, not that he's not a guy who can probably play through some stuff, but they had already lost MacKinnon that night. Apparently, McKinnon's injury didn't look good. It was one of those things where you're like...
We all know Colorado's coasting to a playoff spot. It's just about getting there as healthy as they can.
They're the team that, like... Do you know how, like, when the Flyers do the injury thing, and you're saying... Because, like, you're saying they're coasting to a playoff spot. As we talked this morning, they're not in the playoffs.
Okay, fair enough.
But like, but that's the thing, right? Like, when we sit there and talk about injuries and teams that go through it, and you say, "Oh, the injuries are impacting the results," right?
Right.
The Flyers lean on that constantly, and we sit there and we go, "No, you still don't have enough talent, even when those guys come back," right?
Right.
We look at the Colorado injury list and we go, "Well, this team's clearly better than what they got right now."
Oh, yeah.
Like, when those guys come back, they'll be fine. Like, and Gabe Landeskog's out really long term. Like, that's another big one, obviously. But everybody's known that, and they usually can survive things like that when McKinnon's playing and Rantanen's going. And Rantanen played the whole game, obviously. Ended up with 1. Alex Newhook had 2 that night. He's another really nice young player, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Who's elevated his role from the Stanley Cup year, so he's only getting better. And, okay, so they're out of a playoff spot tonight. They also have 3 games in hand on a lot of teams because I know one of their games got postponed. They were supposed to play in Nashville, and
Nashville had a bit of an
water
main
main
situation.
Break. Yeah, so they lost a game there, or like had a game postponed, so they didn't lose. Obviously, that's going to be made up. They've got like 3 games on everybody in the playoffs, except for I think like Seattle's got 1 game more than they do, and Winnipeg does, and everybody else is 2 or more.
Right.
Like they'll make up the points at some point. I think we all know that. It's just one of these things where for right now, yeah, they're out of the playoffs at the moment. It feels weird, but when you look at their injury list and all the guys are missing, and defensively too, by the way, I didn't even mention defensemen that they're missing. They don't have Bowen Byram. They don't have Josh Manson. Like they're just battered. And when McKinnon left the ice, everybody just kind of had everybody had this reaction, like another one. Like they can't take much more than what they've got. Like they're really pushing it with who they got to play to ice a roster.
And they talked about it on the broadcast, but Val Nichushkin had been injured the previous game, and apparently Jared Bednar talked about kind of seeing the air leave the bench a little bit when they realized they were losing a piece like Nichushkin for the game, and it really kind of affected their play in the game.
Yeah.
And you have to imagine that something similar happens when
a little bit.
Nathan freaking McKinnon goes down.
Well, that's it, because it just gets the vibe of here we go again. I mean, the game before, they didn't just lose, 1 guy. I think that they even had they had a prospect up who was it wasn't his NHL debut, but he was playing pretty, might have been his first game of the season, and he ends up out the next game and he's on the injured list. Yeah, and you're like, wait a minute, this guy just got called up. What's he out for? And then you see that there's an injury associated with it. And there's got to be a vibe of when a player leaves the ice. Here we go again. And then you make it Nathan McKinnon, who, a guy who's in the Hart conversation all the time and stuff like that. You're going to have that's deflating.
Yeah, and also, to be fair, no sympathy, because A, every team goes through injury problems.
Oh, no.
And B, you won the cup last year. So, it's not really something I feel bad for Colorado about, because everyone deals with it.
Sure, and they're battling right now. They haven't won a game since December 1st against Buffalo. They only have 1 other win going back to prior to Thanksgiving. They won on a Saturday against Dallas, and otherwise they've lost 4 in a row, 5 of 6, 7 of 9. It's backing up on them since they were kind of pushing their way back toward the top of that playoff picture. They're it's not that they're in free fall mode. It's just they're stuck trying to get through these injuries right now.
Right. I was going to say this
hitting at the same time. And look, they didn't play the game against Philly. Yes. That's kind of one that you sit there and you go, well, they really just didn't have it that night. The injuries are catching, because even an injury riddled team sometimes can beat the Flyers.
Sure. Absolutely.
But they played Boston twice during this 4-game stretch. They played the Rangers on Friday night and lost in a shootout. It happens. You're not losing to lousy teams and it's catching up to you. And you're losing to playoff teams.
Yeah, and they're a good enough, established enough team that they'll get their bodies back. They'll win 14 out of 16 and be fine.
Well, do you know what's going to help them? And this stretch has already started, and they've lost the first 2 of this, but they're still dealing with certain guys out, because I think the belief was when Lehkonen got hurt that Lehkonen was going to be back relatively soon, maybe miss the 1 game in Philly and then come back. And now he's missed 3. So the sooner that this can happen, the better for them. Cause he was doing a really good job of kind of filling the void of, if you stuck McKinnon down the middle, because Landeskog kind of is a hybrid. He can play center, but he can play wing.
They're all just super talented and can do everything.
No, they are, but Lehkonen jumped into the top line, and all of a sudden it was you can put him with McKinnon and Rantanen, and it works.
Right.
And that's just dangerous. As good of a top line. But then you take him out of the picture, and you're waiting to get, because then your second was, you were waiting for Nichushkin to come back so you could play. I don't even know if Newhook was playing on that line per se, because I think Newhook was possibly center in the 3rd line.
Yeah, he's been in the bottom 6. Up. Yep.
Because of it. And he filled in pretty well, all things considered. I mean, you got,
absolutely.
Same thing, Comfort's been playing top 6 minutes. He's usually a 3rd liner, but he's had to play the top 6. It's just the way it goes. And for the most part, for leading up to that game, they were doing a really good job of kind of treading water until, now McKinnon's out and it's okay, but they're going to start, and it starts on Tuesday when they play the Flyers again. they're going to have 5 games at home in a row. And sometimes being at home and being able to practice
when you're
and,
banged up, or being able to not practice.
Well, not practice, but what I'm saying is that when everybody's right there, like you can't really take a road trip. And they were finishing up a 4-game trip in Philly when McKinnon got hurt.
Right.
And it's like when you can take, like when you don't have to take a road trip and you can just stay at home and kind of feel out, is this guy getting close? Okay, maybe we can get him back. Is this guy getting close? Okay.
Well, your coaches get to come spend some time with your injured players who typically go to the city where they're, playing and to get treatment.
And they're just there. Like, instead of being, they're not doing some East Coast trip where all of a sudden it's like, well, if Lehkonen or Nichushkin were able to be ready at some point, we'll fly them out.
Right.
Everybody's home. They only have, and this is not a bad trip either. They have 2 road games that are split by the holiday break.
Okay.
Leading up to as well. And then they're home through New Year's. They don't go on the road for an extended time period until the end of the first week of January.
That's a good opportunity for the Colorado Avalanche to kind of,
and they're going to have
back on the rails.
And I'm going to tell you, as this homestand goes on, they're going to have opportunities to play teams that they can beat. Like,
this is the make or break stretch for their cup defense season. This is if they fold and go 2-12 here.
I don't feel that way. Like, I hear what you're saying in terms of, yes, you got to make the playoffs, obviously, to get there. But I don't feel like I'm nervous about them for where they are right now.
I'm not either. I just think this next upcoming stretch of games will kind of determine if they're going to turn the ship around and make the playoffs and try to defend the title, or if they're going to be one of those teams that just kind of crap the bed the year after they win.
But they're a team that could kind of sneak their way in, or don't have to be one of the top 3 in their division for me.
They could just run anybody.
For me to still think that they're going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs. Like, I'm not sitting here looking at where they are and going, well, gee, and here's another thing too. By the way, we're looking at it like they're 2 points out of a playoff spot because the wild card says so, and that's the truth.
It's also in their division.
Yes, they're 2 points out of 3rd place in the division. Because the Central's not very good this year.
No.
I mean, you got 2 teams that are pulling away as the front runners of that. And then the rest are borderline not making the playoffs. The Pacific has turned out to be much more loaded in terms of, and I think that's because you've got one big surprise and just others that are taking over, because I think we maybe at the beginning of the year gave the Central more credit and thought, oh, this team's going to be there because they're always there. This team's going to be there. It feels like they're always there.
And then we all thought the Jets would suck, by the way, and guess who was leading the Central?
I had doubts about Vegas because of their goaltending. I worried about their goaltending. I knew, I know about the players. I get it. I had doubts about Vegas. I thought Vegas would be much closer to the wild card spot than top of the division.
That's fair. I definitely could have had them a little further down in the division.
I did not think they were division leading material.
I thought that they would be a wild card-ish team during this stretch of the season, and then as soon as Laurent Brossoit got back and their goaltending kind of turned around, that they would kind of go back to be in Vegas. And then Logan Thompson stepped in. Right. And was just phenomenal. Well, and Aiden Hill has been stellar as a, kind of a 1B tandem guy. Vegas, I'm extraordinarily jealous of Vegas. They had 1 year where they kind of missed the playoffs, and every other year has just been...
They're a really good team.
Ridiculousness.
I mean, if I look at here's the thing too, because you said the thing about Winnipeg, which is true. We did think that.
Yeah, if I told you before the season that on December 11th, Winnipeg would be leading the division, you would not have believed me.
Well, and let's be fair, I liked Dallas as a playoff team coming in. I did, and because I knew they were an up and coming team, I did not have near division leading in my mind.
No, and I like Dallas, and I think.
But I think we're seeing what the potential always was, right? They've got a star scorer, they've got a star goaltender, they've got a star defenseman who's a cornerstone.
Hey, are you gonna mention Jason Robertson there? Because the star scorer is obviously Rope Hintz, right?
No, the star scorer is Robertson, but Rope Hintz is a very good, stable. Rope Hintz becomes the very stable 2-way centerman who you just love to have.
Yes, I know I've said this before.
And he's got more scoring talent than most 2-way centers.
I know I've said this before, but they are doing an incredible job of transitioning their core players on the fly.
Well,
Like
yeah, because of the Jamie Benns and the Tyler Sagans as
Ben
they
and
kick down
Sagan
the lineup.
Ben and Sagan are gracefully aging and sliding down the lineup and still putting up great performances, while the young kids, Hintz and Robertson, are just taking the world by storm.
Sure.
Jason Robertson, listen, we're gonna touch on some top NHL performers later, and Jason Robertson's name will come back up. Let's just say that.
Now, since last week, he's no longer the league leader in goals, but
No.
kind of to be expected in a way when you look at who he's competing with. But
You,
he's still number 2. He's still at 23. His team has played 28 games.
stupid.
We got a 50-goal scorer on our hands here. Easy. But, like, I don't know if anybody coming into this year was saying that.
Right. And we'll get into that. We got to put a pin in that. We'll come back to that on the second half of the show.
I'm making one more note. And then
okay.
We are pinning it. And, oh, by the way, second-round pick, Jason Robertson. Not, like, everybody in the league passing on this guy, and he turns out to be a stud.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll get into lower. We're getting into low draft picks later. Don't you worry.
Back to the Philadelphia Flyers here. Speaking of draft picks, that is about the only thing the Philadelphia Flyers are interested in these days. So we lost 2 or 3 more. 2 of the 3 games played this week.
Right. So that we're taking it back to the Colorado game was what it was. Like I said, I think if you went to that game, you kind of felt a little. Maybe a little robbed of what you go to see because of the fact that if you're there to see stars for the defending Stanley Cup champions, you kind of didn't get the team that is that like you got a B team and it showed. Like they're not as formidable. Like they scored a goal 3 minutes into the game, 4 minutes into the game on a power play, and McKinnon gets the secondary. McCarr took a shot that was deflected by Newhook, and you just thought, okay, this is the way it's going to go tonight, and then McKinnon was gone by the middle of the first period and not able to return. And you're like, oh, great.
Okay.
Like, and as soon as they took him off the ice, like the pregame discussion, especially when it came to the power play, was all about, well, you can't just focus on McCarr. Yeah, everybody loves to and why not? But you can't just key in on him. They got other guys. And then you took McKinnon off the power play because he's not able to play. And it's one less guy to focus on. McCarr kind of becomes very not that he isn't on a normal circumstance, but he really becomes the quarterback of it at that point. And the weaponry around him, like if you're doing the quarterback reference and relating it to football, the weaponry around him is not quite as formidable. So you're sitting there going, well, where do I go now? You pretty much take the pass to Rantanen away and cover the front of the net, and you're defending their power play way better. And that's kind of what happened. Like when McKinnon is flanked on that left side, then you have to watch him. But Rantanen's on the right side. And then they put down the middle. I think it was for this game, it was Newhook and Comfer. But it's different than that on normal circumstances. But they just go like that down the middle, and you're sitting there going, because I think actually, believe it or not, I think Rantanen usually plays like more of a bumper role than he does a flank role. But they didn't have any other option.
They just needed to do what they needed to do.
Well, because I think typically they like Nichushkin on the right side, but when he's unavailable, you got to start shuffling, the rest of your cards and try to figure out where you're going to go with it. And that's what it turned into. And it was, so the game was as expected. You kind of got a lot of the usual suspects when it came to an extent, the usual suspects, but not really. I mean, like these goals were very opportunistic kind of goals. I mean, Travis Sanheim scores, kind of walks into one. Really good goal because he took advantage of his opportunity, used a screen. The Tanner Lazinski goal is one that we love to see, not in terms of the player scoring it, but when you get an opportunity like Joel Farabee had off of rush, you don't have much of an angle. It never hurts to go far pad and play for the rebound, and he did, and Lazinski was right there.
Yep.
So good for him.
Great hockey IQ out of Joel Farabee there.
And then they did something as a team that they haven't been able to do much in recent games, and that Colorado wasn't able to do because Colorado, I just mentioned about, once you took McKinnon off of that power play, they scored on their first power play of the game, then got 4 more and didn't score. Flyers went 2 for 3. So when you take advantage of your power plays, you build up a lead. And it was, everybody who we kind of talked about that makes the power play better. Tony DeAngelo scores kind of Kind of a weird one too, by the way. It was kind of through a screen, kind of tucked itself in, and then Tippett's goal was playing to the boards. Owen Tippett gets a bounce. Love
That
the way
was
that,
I can't tell how intentional that was.
I think Scott Lawton knew what he was doing because he's been playing there long enough to know how those boards react.
Work. That's fair.
So I think he knew what he was doing.
Good veteran move.
Yeah, and so and
all right, so that puts the Flyers up 4-1. When Mikko Rantanen scores with 2:13 left, you absolutely thought they were losing the game, right?
Because
I sure did.
I didn't think it at that point because that goal happens. And I'm trying, I'm in the process of, because there's 2 minutes, 15 seconds left or something, right?
Yeah.
I'm working on the story a little bit because it's 4-1. I'm trying to get as many.
I'm trying to get this article as ready as it can be before the game actually ends.
And before I disappear for 30 minutes to go downstairs too, because that's the other angle of it. And he scores, and the way he scored, by kind of splitting 4 defensemen or 4 defenders.
You go,
all right, but you go, all right, somebody made a play. It's kind of late in the game. You had a moment. It's okay. And then you start watching, and within the next minute, they scored again. And I'm getting ready for, I'm now my hand is getting closer to the delete.
Backspace.
Uh-huh.
I texted closer. When Alex Newhook scored with 1:37 or whatever it was left. I texted my wife and said, turn on the Flyers game. They're in the middle of blowing a 4-1 lead. I sure did.
Yeah, no, I believe you.
Because it would have been hilarious.
Well, because at that point in time, when they still need 2 with 2:13 left, you're still thinking it's a long way
but
back.
When they need 1 with more than a
one
minute
with
and a half
1:37 left, and you're like, yeah, this is possible.
Tug collar.
This is going to get dicey. And then,
And then Travis Konechny seals it, and he needed that one real bad. So
and that was because he had come back not too long before from missing a couple of games, and so they take care of business. They get done what they needed to get done, and
so 2 power play goals against the Colorado Avalanche.
Yep,
they start the game against Washington with a Kevin Hayes power play goal.
Yeah,
and towards the end of the first period, but
they played you can't take away the fact that. They played a really, really good first period against Washington.
Yeah.
And Washington's kind of one of those teams right now that similarly has gone through some injuries. They've been battered. That team on that game, up until we got to the later stages of the third period, by the way, that team's puck management was atrocious.
Oh, yeah.
For a team that's got guys that are better than what the Flyers have, they were managing the puck terribly. And listen, I feel like you need to give there's credit that goes to the Flyers for that because they created some of that.
Sure.
They checked really hard. They were given that effort, the effort that everybody's talking about.
I think it was a big effort game.
It definitely was. Well, and I think part of that is because of the way that they lost a couple weeks before in Washington. This is a team that prolonged your losing streak. You were right there. In your mind, you can beat this team.
Oh, yeah.
You hung in there with them. You got it to overtime. You were 2 minutes away from winning the game in regulation. You're sitting there going, we can beat this team. Absolutely. And to their credit, they were once again in that position because this wasn't score a power play goal and take a 1-0 lead and play a really good first period. They gave up the power play goal, which I think was the 4th power play that Washington had or something.
Something like that.
They had a lot. Wild. They kept giving power plays. They took 3 penalties in the first period and then immediately took another one and finally gave up a goal. And then, that just carries over. Washington got back kind of into it in the second period because they outshot them 12-8. But realistically, if we're correct about this and being, as factual as we can, the Flyers probably had the better third period.
Yeah.
And but when you're 1 goal away from winning or losing, it just takes somebody, and this kind of comes back to as we're going to shift to the next tab that we have that kind of indicates this because we'll go over a lot of this. But the quote after the game was, "We don't make enough plays."
Yep.
And that's the truth of it. They don't make enough plays to overcome stuff like that. The play that Dylan Strome makes to score the winning goal is a nice deflection, a really nice cutting through the slot, get a stick on it, change.
Pretty little play.
Yeah. Yep. And that's how you make a play that wins a game.
Yep.
That's what it is. And then we can get into all the stuff at the end. Now, I'm not talking about what happened after the second one, but like it's a 2-1 game. It's a 2-1 game.
Yep.
They make it a 4-1 game because of empty net goals. They've got one of the best empty net goal scores in history.
OV scores number 794 and 795 into the empty net.
Well, so I was thoroughly convinced as the game, especially as the game went on, he's sitting on 793 coming in, and all the talk that we had previously about, well, what if this is like a chance at 800? What if this is
800, right?
And he's about to go through this game and get nothing, and you're going, wow, okay, he's stuck on 793. If he's still stuck on, like, I honestly started to look ahead because I think, again, it's like another 14 games till when they're back or something, or when they play again.
You start looking at that game.
Well, right. Why start looking at that? Because then you're sitting there going, if he only goes one goal every other
drought.
Right, but like a goal every other game, which he kind of is at that pace anyway.
Right.
You're like, is it like I wasn't thinking about it from 800. Now I'm sitting there going, well, if he's stuck on 793, 802 is probably in play.
Gordy's absolutely.
And then you're talking about pass to second. I'll take that as a history making moment.
That'd be cool. I mean, look, and you would. Is that game in Philadelphia? The next one.
The next one, yes.
Oh, so you'd be in the building for it too, which I know that you would appreciate.
They come back in basically exactly a month from today. Well, so January 11th is when they'll be back, and you know that you have that natural break built in. And I'm looking just to look at their schedule. They have Washington plays 4 times this week, including the Sunday that we're talking.
So do the Flyers.
Three times leading up to the break. They come out of the break. They play 3 more times. They've got a week with 3 more, and then another Sunday game in early January, and then that's when the game comes up. So that
Flyers play a very, very similar schedule. It's like 1 less game in that first week of January.
Right. So there are 14 games right now that separate. It was 15 total because they played Seattle on Friday. So it was 15 between the 2 games against Philly. Now it's 14. It's 14, and we're going to get into where his totals are at because now it feels a little less likely. But he's, the key is, do you hit a drought? And right now, because of how hurt they are, because you don't have Nick Backstrom, you don't have Tom Wilson, you don't have guys like that. While you're missing guys like that, when you're going to go and play, they're going to play Winnipeg, tough team, not giving up a lot of goals right now. Dallas is on the schedule. Toronto's on the schedule. Winnipeg again, the Rangers. Then you've got some teams that he might be able to score against.
He loves scoring against Winnipeg, though. That's a stat we talked about in the group chat.
Yeah, but I'm saying right now, Winnipeg's got one of the best goalies in the game.
That is fair. I'm talking about. All right, one more game, and then we'll start hitting our around the league stuff. One more game, which will include a little bit more of a hit on Ovi.
Sure. So the Vegas game.
Vegas game Friday night. I'm going to go ahead and say this.
Okay.
And it's something I don't think it's a very hot take. Carter Hart stole you another point.
Right. Well, and if nothing else, because I was thinking about this fuels your argument of why to trade.
At least play him less. If Felix Sandstrom plays in that game, they lose that game 100%. Well,
full disclosure, I thought Sandstrom was getting Wednesday against Washington because Sandstrom didn't get a game over the entire 5-game homestand. In fact, I'm going to have to go and look up the last time that maybe Sandstrom plays again in Arizona on Sunday night, which we're obviously recording before, but maybe that's where you give him a game. I don't know. Sandstrom has played 8 games this year total and has not played since the last game of the losing streak on November 26th. So he has gone now 2 weeks minimum since playing a game. It's been Carter Hart the entire time.
And there's always a possibility he's got something small and nagging going on that he could play if they need him to, but they don't want to push him in a start type of thing.
Nah, I don't feel like that's you know
don't
what?
Think so?
Because if it was the case, we wouldn't need to ask.
That's fair.
We would need to keep asking, well, who's the starter? Because I think if nothing else, people are waiting to find out when that game comes up where it's when's Carter getting a break? They've played every other, quite literally. The last time that Sandstrom played was he got time in both of those games because they pulled Hart early in the Pittsburgh game. And then they started Sandstrom in the Islander game on the road. That was 10. And then he hasn't started a game since, and they've played 6. So Hart's got 6 starts in a row.
Well, and they've played it every other day. If Carter's in a rhythm, and at home you're not really traveling too much. I know he started in Vegas too. But, you're not, maybe things are a little easier for him, and he wants to play some games and get in a little more of a groove. And I mean, that's borne out by the fact that we saw him play a stellar hockey game in Vegas.
Right. And I get that. Like, it just feels to me like you can't just wait for the back-to-backs and say that's when we're going to play this guy. Like, you got to throw him in there at some point because, like, they don't have another back-to-back for nearly 2 weeks. I don't think, like, you can't let nearly a month go by before he plays another game. I think you've got to get him into maybe this Arizona game just to get him into a game.
Just to get him a game.
And then look,
I don't disagree.
If you want to ride Carter Hart from there and say Colorado, New Jersey, Rangers, be my guest. That's every other day. He can handle the workload. That's fine. It's just you can't run him out there after running him out there for 6 straight. Turn that into 11 straight. Say, sure, you're going to get to start in Toronto in that weird afternoon game that's coming up. And then finally hand the reins over. Like, hell, they could even probably work it out where they could start Hart in both games because there's enough of a gap.
Right.
The 2:00 start to a 7:30 start on the road.
Yeah.
Like, I could do that. And I just don't know if that's good. Like, to me, I'm sorry. I don't know what that benefit that has to have a goaltender like Felix Sandstrom, who is supposedly good enough to be your backup. You got to play him.
Well, I wonder how much of it is, it's not so much about Felix Sandstrom as it is you're managing Carter Hart. And if Carter Hart wants to play, Carter Hart's going to play type of thing. And not so much that he's like demanding it, but as long as he feels good and feels comfortable starting the next game, they're going to let it ride. And like, I'm not saying that's the correct decision. I wonder if that's where they are at.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because the last thing you want to do is, get this kid mad at you.
Well, I don't think he is in any way, shape.
No, I agree.
There's no reason for him to be. What I'm trying to get at is that, like, Felix Sandstrom got those 2 appearances. He started the game in Washington on November 23rd. Before that, his last start was on the back end of a back-to-back over a weekend in mid-November when he started the game against Dallas, and then he had gotten the win against St. Louis. But that's it. Like, I don't want to have a goalie who, at that point, you turn around and you say, okay, after starting 3 games in a span of like 6 or something from November 13th through November 26th.
Now take a month off.
Right. Now sit there for a month.
So Carter Hart's contract is up after next season.
Okay.
Which means that he can negotiate this summer. But it also means that he's got a year and a half left, under $4 million.
Okay.
With team control.
I mean, I can't even think about contracts moving forward because I don't know who's going to be negotiating them.
All I'm saying is if Chuck Fletcher's not here anymore and they do decide to go rebuild, Carter Hart's very tradable.
Here's the problem.
And you get a monstrous haul for him.
I don't know about that right now, and I'll tell you why. No, I'll tell you why. Because right now, until they clear up the Hockey Canada stuff, people are not as interested, and it's the truth.
That's fair. I forgot he was on that team.
Because
is fair.
Because we don't have answers, and teams are very hesitant. Regardless, it's regardless of talent.
Ottawa Senator Alex Formenton did not sign. Well, right, and did not sign before the December 1st deadline for RFAs. He is not eligible to compete in the NHL this year. If he wants to compete next year, he'll have to sign a contract, obviously. He is also one of the players that has not made a statement regarding the Hockey Canada situation.
Right,
Most of that team has come out and said, hey, it wasn't me. He has not made a statement.
Right, and kind of in a way, Carter Hart really hasn't much either. Like, I think he made a statement through his agent.
He did the standard of what all the other players, or most of the other players on that team
right,
did.
Like, in other words, I think his representation, who represents more than just him on that team, kind of issued a big blanket statement about, like, my players were not
none of my players are involved. Right.
But we don't know the answers, and there's stuff that can come out, and right now until it's cleared up, because it was a point that I had even forgotten about, and I think Charlie O'Connor tweeted something about it.
I forgot he was on that team.
And at that point, I went, "That's a valid point." Didn't even remember like that. kind of it's hanging over everybody's head for right now, because for the most part there hasn't been any story on it, and yet, like, the funny part is that I think, like, I know about the shadow that's cast over Hockey Canada and kind of all that stuff right now. I wasn't thinking about the members of that team specifically in the moment, kind of, if
Oh
you
yeah,
will.
no, it's already been affecting players and will be over the next couple
No,
of
I know.
years.
Like, what I mean when I say that is that, like, his World Juniors is going to start really soon, and it's almost like it's lost its luster to an extent, because it's like, well, Hockey Canada is still in all this stuff, and it's, they're still like kind of a mess. So that we don't have answers to, and we really need to get answers to, and all that.
Cale Makar also on that team, by the way. But he was
Makar
factually out of state when the incident occurred.
Correct. And he had way more of a backstory and way more of a clearance. Like, there are
straight up alibi.
There are certain players who gave enough evidence and that said enough things.
Certain players were like at events in other countries, or like playing games, like things that you can track and see that they were literally there and not at this gala party.
Well, because I thought that one of the biggest identifiers of the whole thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong from reading this, but was if they were a college player, they were not involved, because it had something to do with the college age thing.
So it happened.
It was Canadian junior players is what I thought it was.
It happened at an event after the tournament, and it was a tournament that college players were not at. It was like the gala event was. None of the NCAA players were there.
Okay.
So that's part of the reason Cale Makar was cleared very quickly.
Exactly. So it focuses now on the bigger focus was on the junior players, not the college age players. So
Correct.
so Makar is golden at this point. Like,
no, he is literally
you can go ahead
clear.
And continue. Yeah, you can go ahead and continue to like him all you want.
The Colorado Avalanche have no regrets about signing that contract for him.
And not that you're looking to move him, but
no. Okay, circling all the way back to this Vegas game. I don't know how we went this far off the rails here.
Because you were talking about Carter Hart and his trade value.
That's fair.
I just had to pump the brakes for you on that, because
you're right.
As much like, listen, if there was ever a game that fuels your argument against everything else that you talk about with that, this was it, because he made two incredible saves toward the end of regulation. The one with the stick on Carrier was insane. And then he had another one where he went cross crease and got one that sure looked like it was going to be a goal, because the play set up the right way.
Oh, yeah.
So I got a couple things to say about the rest of the game beyond that. Number one, this team is terrible in overtime.
Oh, yeah.
And yet,
it turns out when you go 3-on-3 and you go to the skill mode, the Flyers tend to struggle.
And I know it's an obvious statement. To be honest, that was the best overtime they've played, because they had 5 more chances than Vegas did. Vegas
it lasted more than 3 whole minutes.
No, worse than that was Vegas had nothing for that entire 3 minutes leading up to. Barely had possession. And the first chance that they get with an odd man rush or a breakaway or whatever, it's in the back of the net. It's as predictable as anything, and that's part of the problem with struggling in overtime.
Flyers hockey, baby.
The other part of it was that, like, just this concept, like, yeah, they're a terrible team in overtime, like, and I get that. But just the fact that, once again, like, and this is really where the whole thing ties together, is the offensive side of things. And I'm hoping people read this as no offense, not no offense, even though it's both.
Check out our YouTube channel for our on-screen graphics.
Because the goal wasn't even good, the one that they did score. Like, it's behind the net, it's a turnover, quick throw it on goal, it hits a pad and goes in. Like,
yep.
So I did, as I tend to do, I did some number crunching for you, because that's what we like on this show. We like having numbers that back up what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do this in the way that, because maybe maybe you don't. So let's just go off of this. So the team played 8 games in October, and they've now played 19 going into the Sunday game against Arizona. They played 19 in November/December.
Yeah.
In the 8 games in October, do you have any idea how, and I'll take either answer here, either how many total goals they scored or how many goals per game they averaged?
It was like 3 goals a game, wasn't it?
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
They scored 24 total goals, 3 per game. Now, if I'm being even more technical about it, I took away the one empty netter they had against New Jersey in the opener. The only one they scored in October.
Hey, remember when the Flyers beat New Jersey? Okay.
Yeah, I know. And got an average of, with 23 goals without empty netters,
2.89.
2.88.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Which is still okay. Like, because let's remember something about the games in October. That includes a shutout loss to San Jose. It includes a couple of closer games that were a little bit more low scoring. They won a couple. You got to remember, they won a couple of 3-1, 3-2. One of the games, I took their highest goal output of the thing and dropped it by a goal because of the empty netter. So that's more like a 4, that kind of stuff. So, okay, fine. How many goals do you think they've scored in the 19 games since then, in November and December total?
Oh, man.
Or what do you think the goals per game is?
Is it the same number of total goals?
No, they've scored more in 19 games than 24.
Okay. I'll say 31.
It's higher than that.
Okay. What is it?
42.
Okay. I'm legitimately stunned.
But if you take away empty net goals, it's 40.
Okay.
So then it made you closer. That's an average of 2.21 per game with the 42, 2.11 per game without the empty netters. When you're averaging 3 goals per game or 2.88 when you take away the one empty netter, that's sometimes how you can also get a 5-2-1 record.
That's fair.
When you average just north of 2 goals per game, you get a 4-10-5 record. And I'm going to make it worse for you. And I didn't write this one down, but I already know how to do that. Like, to get the number I want to. I can take away, out of the 19 games that I just mentioned from November, December, I can take away 2 total games.
St. Louis and Colorado.
Exactly.
Yes.
And drop the entire total goal total by 10.
Yep. Does that drop it under 2?
That's still, yep, because there's still 17 games left to go over, 32 total goals in the other 17. It's now all of a sudden 1.88 per game. You're
so outside
not
of
going
2 little
to
outliers,
win games by scoring 1 to 2 goals a night, and it's why
it doesn't matter how good Carter Hart is.
But that's why I've come up with the whole time. Like, if I'm sitting there watching, and it didn't happen it didn't happen in the Washington game or whatever, but over the course of the homestand, when I'm there watching them play Tampa, and Tampa gets their third goal with 4 seconds left in the second period, game's over. They're not scoring 3. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they're down 3-0. They could have been down 3-1 or 3-2, and it's like, well, that's kind of the end of that.
They're not scoring the 4th goal they need to win the game.
Like, here's a perfect one. They were down, they were tied 1-1 against the Devils last Saturday after 2 periods. And early in the third, they gave up 2 goals really quick, and it was 3-1. And at 3-1, you went game over.
Yep. And if Arizona jumps out to a quick 3-0 lead tonight, game over.
It very well could be.
And I did note it there. We are recording Sunday morning. We're not obviously talking about the Arizona game Sunday night. We will talk about that on next week's show.
Yep. And then we only have and then we got a little bit of a break coming up after that because we're going to do the holiday break thing.
We do. We are going to take a Christmas break. All right, so let's stop talking about this team.
But that's why I'm saying, like, when you can't score goals, and that's their big problem, and it goes back to the press conference that I was talking about, from like, they don't make enough plays. And it's the truth. You don't make enough plays because you don't have the talent. Nope. And that's the thing, like, as we get into, like, here's your transition to the rest of the league, by the way. When you start to look at the other teams at the bottom of the standings, does every other team that's below them in the standings right now have a player that you sit there and you go, that guy can take over a game? That guy might score 2 goals on a given night.
Right.
Columbus here you go. Let's pull this game up because this is a game that happened against Columbus. Columbus scored 4 goals in a game where they gave up 9. They lost terribly. But yes. Patrick Laine had 2.
Yep.
They got a guy who can go out there and then give you 2 goals on a night when the rest of the team's lousy.
So since you did mention Columbus, I do feel the need, and we don't have a tab for it, I do feel the need to mention Jake Voracek.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Yes.
It is looking like Jake Voracek's career may be coming to an end. He suffered a concussion approximately 6 weeks ago at this point. and it's looking like he might not ever get to put on the skates again. And
There's a lot of stuff to sort out with that in the next few months because
yeah, it's not certain.
everything is testing and going through possible
And
treatment and all that.
every head injury is different.
Sure. Well, it is,
I,
but when you're no, but when you're a player like Voracek who can come out in a press conference and tell people immediately,
yeah,
I've had 7 or 8 of these in my career. You're getting like you're starting to tread into Lindros territory, guys who the more it happens, the worse it gets for you, the longer the recovery is, it becomes a problem. And his career very well may be over at this point. He's done for the year probably at the very least, and
yeah,
that's the first step, and we'll see where it goes from there. But
if
it's quite a story. We obviously feel awful for him because he like on top of being like, I know that he was a polarizing player, especially
towards the
toward
end
the
here.
end here, but he was a good player here for a lot of years, and
Jake Voracek is a Flyers Hall of Famer,
and he was a great guy.
Yep.
First and foremost, he's a great guy, yep. And this is a real shame for him that this is the way. Like nobody wants to be told when they have to stop.
Yep. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I watch the occasional UFC fight, and there's kind of a general rule of thumb in MMA that once you get knocked out real bad 3 times, you should probably hang it up. Like that's kind of when your brain has had enough and you're never really going to be the person that you are. I hope for Jake Voracek that even if his career comes to an end, I hope that his quality of life is good. I hope that his brain is okay to live life, even if he's not able to play hockey. I hope that he is making the correct, responsible decisions about how to prolong his livelihood, his conscious life, as it were.
Well, yeah, well, we know how this stuff typically goes. Like, and I'm not talking about like because you're right about the livelihood and all that type of stuff, but we know how this stuff goes. If this is the end for him and his playing career is over, somebody's waiting somewhere with a job in hand. Like, hey, you can help us in some way, shape, or form.
If not in North America, he'll go back to Czechia and just be a hero.
To be honest, I had thought that because like he's the type of guy who I can see taking the Yager route and owning a team over there.
I agree.
And because he's built up enough of a reputation as one of those players. You got to remember something about him too. The Global Series thing was really relatively new when they went over and played there.
And then one of the reasons they went over was for him.
Right. And he's an absolute hero when you go into his home country. And
I'm just really annoyed we never got to hear Jake Voracek and John Tortorella interact at a press conference because they would have been so good together. Those two, their mutual hatred for the media. God, Sam Carchidi would never say another word again.
Anywho,
Jake, we wish you the best. I don't know if you're an NHL Hall of Famer or a Hockey Hall of Famer. You are 100% a Flyers Hall of Famer.
Well, either way, yeah, we definitely do wish Jake the best, and it's tough. It's tough to see things like this. I mean, there's a lot of stories like this that go around anymore where it's guys who get hurt and it's threatening careers, and it's not good.
If this is it for him, when he does officially hang it up, we'll do something a little bit more formal for him.
Sure. I mean, you're going to be waiting for a while on that one.
I know. No, I know.
Right now, his focus was maybe the end of the season. We'll see what happens. So
I know, and I'm hoping he has it in him. But
sure.
Anyway, back to Tage Thompson. Yeah. Tage Thompson scored 4 goals in the first period, and the entire hockey world went, whoa, what?
The entire hockey world didn't pay attention to a game that was going on right in front of my very eyes.
Right.
We were more invested in what Tage Thompson was
all
doing.
of a sudden, Buffalo Columbus became the hottest ticket in town. And everyone, the entire hockey world flipped over to that game and watched Tage Thompson score the 5th goal.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if you've listened to the latest 31 Thoughts.
Nope.
I'm sorry, 32 Thoughts.
Yes.
They had a discussion. Tage Thompson only played 5 shifts and roughly 3 minutes in the 3rd period.
Okay.
Should he have played more to go record hunting? The record is 7.
I don't. The problem is that stuff like that doesn't matter to people anymore. What matters more is longevity. What matters
Okay.
more is what a guy can do for you well beyond a season. This, the thing is that, and I even said this as the score got run up pretty early. It was 5-0, it was 6-0 at the end of the first period.
6-0 at the end of the first.
It was
right.
5-0 in the first 10 minutes of the game or something, right?
Yep.
And I even said this is a game straight out of the 1980s or something. Like a guy with 4 goals, 6 goals in the first period, and then Columbus starts putting up a fight too and gets 2 really quick, to make it 6-2, and you're sitting there going, this really is a game out of the 1980s. We're going to get some crazy weird score.
Well, and you start thinking about that LA Seattle game from just about a week and a half ago that ended up 9-8 in overtime.
But isn't it crazy that you can go off of that you can sit there and go, gee, when was the last time a team scored 9 goals in a game? Oh, last week.
Right.
Come on.
It's the second one of the season. It's old hat. It's boring. We've seen it already.
Exactly. Anyway, no, he's been incredible, and he's really been incredible going back to last year. Obviously,
Tage Thompson found it. Whatever. I don't know if he found a demon to sell his soul to, or.
Well, I'm going to tell you what part of the problem was right away. I can tell you what part of it was. So he played briefly in St. Louis, where he was drafted, gets traded, and then has kind of your typical startup year in Buffalo. Didn't get to play much at all in that 2019-20 season. He had 1 NHL game total. To be honest, he was starting to look like a bust at that point.
Yeah.
Like he really was. And similarly, but then everything gets screwed up, right? And I say screwed up in the sense that you play that shortened 21 season, 56 games, same opponents. He has your average typical third line numbers.
You get dunked on by the Atlantic Divisional year.
No, that year they were in that East. It was
right.
But still, yeah, that year you're playing like Buffalo struggled to beat the Flyers that year. The Flyers weren't very good, but they struggled to beat the Flyers. They were Then you're playing the teams that actually were really good. So you're playing the Islanders were still really good because the Islanders made a playoff run that year. The Rangers were getting better. Boston's in that division at that point. You were getting beat up. Pittsburgh was still giving it. Washington was still getting you were getting beat up on the regular.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty obvious. So he had your typical third line numbers. And then last year, the explosion just starts. He has 38 goals, 68 points in 78 games. And he's going to top both of them this year at the pace he's on because
they finally got rid of that deadweight bum Jack Eichel.
Maybe so. I don't know. But he's 27 points shy of tying his career high from last year.
Did Jack Eichel just bully Tage Thompson? Did he just walk in and nogie him every day? And as soon as Jack left, Tage was like, all right, let's score some goals.
We're talking about a guy at this point who is more than definitely on pace based on where the season is, 50 and 100.
Yep.
He's easily on pace for that. And yeah, he's got some games let's be clear. When he scores 5 in a game, he started the game at 16.
That does leap you up
jumps into 21. But he was having a year going in anyway. His pace at 16 was still good enough that he was going to be able to top his career high probably.
If I told you before the season started that a Buffalo Sabre would be top 5 in league scoring, would you have believed me?
I wouldn't have believed you if you would have told me that half of what was in the top 5 is in there. That a Dallas Star, a Buffalo Sabre, and a Vancouver Canuck are going to be in the top 5 of goal scoring. In between the two,
goal scoring, okay.
In between the two likely suspects, I would have told you you're nuts. That's because we're getting closer and closer. We're not quite to the point where we're bordering on it yet, but we're getting closer to halfway.
Yeah, we're about a third of the way.
Right, and it's if I scroll down beyond that top 5 and look at who's leading in goals, I'm not surprised by anybody at this point.
Are you surprised by the fact that Connor McDavid has 25 goals?
No.
And we can start getting into this.
Well, that's not what that means, but...
No, I know.
Okay.
But Connor McDavid, I'm not surprised he has 54 points through 28 games. I'm a little surprised he has 25 goals. If you told me he had 18, I'd believe 25.
Yeah, I'm not surprised though. It really actually doesn't surprise me at all.
He's on pace. Let me go to Elite Prospects because Elite Prospects is actually great,
I
and
guess,
they
yeah.
do the pacing for you.
Okay, I guess the point you're trying to make, by the way, is that his career high is 44 from last year. So
Right, and
you
he's on
know,
pace. He's on pace for
60.
73. 73 goals.
Well, then see now for fun because I've been trying to do the pacing all along, and like
He
you
has
said,
20. Elite Prospects just does it for you. He has
oh, I
20,
know. Well, so I'm looking
25
up the other
goals
two
in
that we already seen.
28 games.
Nuts.
Stupid. And
Come
by
on.
the way, he's gonna average. He's gonna add 85 assists on average for a total of
Well, he's at
158.
He's at 2 points per game right now.
Yeah, he's just a hair under
He's
two.
he's nearly at 2. Yeah.
158 points. Are you freaking kidding me?
By the way, Tage Thompson is on pace for, according to that Elite Prospects, on pace for 62 goals and 121 points.
Yeah, and you expect that to trail off a little bit because
I understand. So then, what the hell is Robertson on pace for? I got to go look that one up now because Robertson's got to be higher. Robertson might be pushing a 70 as well.
So
Close. 67 goals and 123 points in an 82 game season.
Rope hints on the pace for 96 points, by the way.
Is he? Good for him.
33-63.
Do you want to know what I saw the other day that really was telling?
Okay.
If you want to talk Buffalo Sabres, Rasmus Dahlin is on pace for 100 points right now.
Yep. It's stupid.
That's crazy.
Rasmus Dahlin is, I think he's like relevant in league scoring. Like he's 20. He's tied with Rope Hintz. He's 21st in league scoring as a defenseman. By the way, Erik Karlsson is still 7th because he's a mutant. He has 37 points.
Are we talking? Yeah, are we talking about the part where like a guy who just takes over his whole team's, performance because there's nobody else on that team that comes close to what he's done?
No, absolutely not.
It's
no.
crazy.
Okay. Speaking of things that nobody else has done, I don't know where I'm going to transition on that. Four players are at 40 plus points.
No,
already.
that wasn't what that meant.
Oh, is that not that? Okay.
Nope. 4 teams.
What did that mean?
4 teams have 40 points in the standings.
Oh, okay. Well, it also works out that 4 players have at least 40 points. It's Tage Thompson, Jason Robertson, Leon Draisaitl.
I didn't realize that at that given moment, but
yeah,
sure.
it just works out really well. Connor McDavid, by the way, also has an 8-point lead in overall league points. He is 8 points up on Leon Draisaitl.
So, okay, here's maybe an interesting way to transition this conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
The obvious answer is McDavid gets the Hart then, because the point totals demand it, kind of, right? But
no.
do you look at somebody like if Dallas makes a really strong playoff finish, or not playoff finish, but like standings finish?
Connor
right?
McDavid gets the Ted Lindsay.
Sure.
Jason Robertson gets the Hart.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, does Robertson deserve more of a conversation here because of the fact that he quite literally is the most valuable to his team at this given moment?
Quite frankly, I think Connor Hellebuck probably deserves the Hart. But
you're not Vezina.
Right, they're not going to give it to a goalie anytime soon, I don't think.
No,
unless somebody just has a ridiculous season.
He would need really ridiculous number. Are you sure that he would get the Vezina?
I mean, I assume so.
Or does Linus Ullmark have something to say about that right now?
I mean,
Ullmark is leading in every category.
That is fair. Linus Ullmark has been stellar for the Boston Bruins.
And guess what? Hellebuck's not even the top 2 in goals against and save percentage are not Connor Hellebuck.
Okay.
Either, and they're the same 2 players.
Okay.
It's Ullmark and it's Ilya Samsonov.
Ilya Samsonov, yeah.
And Samsonov, the only thing that's going to hurt Samsonov, and it's not going to hurt Ullmark as much, I don't think, but we'll see about that, is Samsonov is not playing near as much.
Right. Well,
Ullmark is getting a lot of the starts in Boston, though.
I did also want to mention that Ilya Sorokin at the Island is having a pretty good season, too. He's got some stupid numbers.
Yeah.
But no,
Sorokin's top 5 in both. This just debunked my whole thing with Samsonov. If Samsonov is 2nd in goals in save percentage and number 4 is Matt Murray, his
counterpart
partner.
Yeah, they might get the Jennings. Good for them.
Yeah, they probably that's fair.
All right, 4 teams are above 40 points. It's the Vegas Golden Knights. It's the Toronto Maple Leafs, who we were just briefly discussing there. The New Jersey Devils and the Boston Bruins.
3 of those teams we've already talked about regularly. The reason I'm bringing it up is because Toronto's entered the conversation here.
Toronto
Pretty big time.
started slow, started kind of an up and down team, some struggles here, some struggles there. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know I'm a Steve Dangle fan, so I do end up kind of following the Leafs, not really so much because I care about the team, just because the guy I enjoy his content happens to talk about them a lot. So I do know kind of the season they've been having, and that team is starting to click in a pretty scary way, and it's one of those things in Toronto that it doesn't really matter until the playoffs start. But as far as the regular season goes, they're getting that machine churning along pretty smoothly.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
And they are not going to be a bad team. And again, it's going to come down to the playoffs for them because they've proven that they can do it in the regular season.
Want to have some fun? Want to have some fun with one of their players right now?
Okay. Mitch Marner on the 22-game point streak or whatever it is.
Okay, then that's this. Yeah, well, it's 22. When was the last time he didn't have a point?
Was it against the Flyers?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but do you know what date you have to go back to figure out when the last time he was held without a point was?
No, hit me.
October 24th. I know.
The entire month of December, every single game, he's like, yeah, I got a point.
There's been maybe one game, like only one game that I can think of too, where he's like had to get it through like via an empty netter or something like that.
Where he's had to really, really work for it.
No, not even work for it, where it's like they made it a point to make sure he got one, like to keep it going. For the most part, he's scoring or helping getting assists early enough in games that it just becomes another, like it really actually isn't one of these cases of
Mitch Marner has a 22-game point streak, which is a massive tie, it's a tie for 20th. It's like a 4 or 5 guy tie for 20th all time. Do you know what the record is?
What for? What? Sorry.
Point streak.
I was in the middle of looking it up to ask the same thing. So
okay, don't look.
I already did. It was already.
Okay. Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, well, of course.
From October 5th, 83 to January 27th of 84 had a 51 game point streak.
Now, as ridiculous as that does sound, Marner's tied at 22.
Yeah.
With a couple, first of all, with a couple of other really, with one absolutely outstanding hockey name on here. And then a couple
two legends, and then maybe the best hockey name I've heard all week. Steve Yzerman, Danny Heatley, whatever.
And Bronco Horvath.
I don't think he's related to Bo Horvat, but
no, that wasn't Horvat. It was.
I know.
So he's not related.
Man, that is a good one.
But here's what I'm looking at when I look at this. Okay, so they play Anaheim, the Rangers, and Washington this week. 3 teams that are. Well, one that's at the bottom of the standings. Washington's scuffling. We already talked about that, and the Rangers aren't exactly lighting it up either.
Right.
So that could be 20 if he can get if he gets a point against Anaheim, and that's 23. He's into a tie with Wayne Gretzky and Guy Lafleur.
Is that good?
That's pretty good. If he gets one against the Rangers and gets it to 24, there's another tie with a Gretzky streak. If he can get it to 25, he's into a tie for the 12th longest, or for 12th.
Yeah.
If he gets this thing to 28, he's in the top 10 all time. And 28 is now visible. If that's 23, 24, 25.
Yeah, you're 6 away. You're getting there.
It would be the first game after Christmas would be 28.
Man, imagine going into the Christmas break with a 27-game point streak and the first game back. There's just so much pressure.
As a matter of fact, do you want to know how historical we could get with this?
Okay.
If that St. Louis game on the 27th would be number 28, if he got that far with this, right? They play 2 more games, so literally the last game of 2022 would be number 30, and if he got it, he'd be just I want to be careful of how I say this. It would be the 6th time that somebody got 30.
Wow.
he'd be only the 4th player to do it.
Wow.
Because Gretzky did it 3 times.
Now now that we're talking about this, the streak snaps on Tuesday against Anaheim, right?
No, I can't see it snapping against Anaheim. I'm a little concerned about like the Tampa game.
That's fair.
I'll admit that. Or I'm a little concerned. I'm even a little concerned about the Ranger game because if it's Shesterkin, like listen, the one thing that this means that their team hasn't had in a long time is a game where they all get blanked.
Yeah, that is fair.
So
John Gibson shutout on Tuesday.
Nah, it won't be a John Gibson shutout, that's for sure. But
I might put $1 on it.
By the way, do you have any idea who the other 2? If Gretzky's got 3 of the streaks that are over 30,
I know Mario's one of them.
Okay, do you know who the other one is then?
Is it Bobby Clark?
No, it is a Hall of Famer though. I don't know
this
much. It's a Hall of Famer who didn't do it with the team that everybody knows him best for. How about that?
Oh, right. It was Matt Sundin with Quebec.
Yes. But there's some irony to that, by the way, because the team everybody knows him the best for is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and a Leaf is challenging right now. Correct me if I'm wrong. I want to make sure I have to double check this. He's already got the longest streak in team history, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Yes, he does. Okay, I just want to make sure of that.
All right. So since we were
it's pretty remarkable. Where we at? We want to go to the Ovechkin stuff too.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna transition. I thought we talked about Ovi.
Well, we did, but we didn't mention like how he's at because he scored 2 goals.
He's at 796. He's currently 6 away from tying Gordie Howe, 7 away from passing.
So I keep bridging the gap to the milestone. So I keep looking at 800 first because he'd only be the 3rd player to get to 800,
and then 802,
and then you have 2. Then you have the next goal after getting to 800 ties Gordie, and then the one after that passes him. So he's going to score 3 goals in a row that are significant because
he's going to do it in a game too. He's going to get a hat trick. Bang, bang, bang.
I don't know. I mean, that'd be pretty cool if he did, but
it'd be pretty Ovi.
Yeah, it would. The thing is though, and this kind of goes back to the stuff we were talking about with some of the stats. Ovi doesn't have, many of those games this year. Like the 2-goal game against the Flyers this week, where both of them were into an empty net, are pretty much like some of the only. Like I don't think he has many more multi-goal games than that. He has 2 against Vancouver, and I think he had maybe a 2 against Vancouver earlier in the year. That's it. So he's only got 3 multi-goal games all year,
right?
Which really is not common. Like
he's spreading it out much more than he.
Yeah, usually in a season he has 7 or 8 of these minimum. Usually more than that.
Where he's sniffing around the hat trick by the mid-second period.
When he had a stretch over the course of late October and mid-November where I think in this is 8 games, he scored in 6 of them.
Wow.
So 6 out of 8 games he had goals, and then he cooled off for a while after that. Like he had just 2 goals or 3 goals in the next 7 or 8 games.
Yeah, it's starting to get weird because now that we're less than 100 goals away, it's time to start doing the when can he break the record game. So let's just say over the rest of the year he scores about 30. That puts him at about 45 for the year, a little bit of a downtick from last year.
You're adding 30 to his total from now,
right? 30 more the rest of the way.
So at 826. So you're talking about not next year, but the year after.
So he'd be about 70 away. So if he does 40 or 50 again next year, then the year after that, he'll come into the season about 20, 25 goals away, and he's 100% doing it.
Yep.
Assuming, of course, knock on wood, assuming he stays healthy and blah, 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 and he hasn't had too many major injuries. So hopefully he holds up, knock on wood, but I think he signed that 4-year contract pretty pointedly.
Yeah.
Because he negotiated that himself, and I think he said, all right, we're going to do 4 years, we're going to break the record, we're going to go play a year in Russia, and we're out.
Actually, by the way, just as a fun side note, by the way, did see him walking toward the bus as we came out of the locker room.
Nice. All right.
Fresh off of his 2 empty netters that day, and then 1 more later this week to get to 796. Nothing like going from 793 to 796 and doing it all in the last 2 minutes of a game.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
All right.
That's why he's one of the best. When you have as many goals as he scored, you get a few empty netters too, don't you?
Absolutely. So as we head towards the end of the show here, we're going to do a quick little update on the bottom feeders in the NHL. Before
relevant information to Flyers fans, because you want to know.
And before we do that, the reason why, the Shane Wright update.
Oh, we do need to do that.
Okay, you haven't seen his stats recently, right?
I know some things that have happened, but I don't know
I was
them
gonna say, I
all
don't want you to look. He has played 28 games.
in the NHL, right?
The WHL. Connor Bedard.
Oh, Connor Bedard. You said Shane
Connor,
Wright. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I said Shane Wright. I meant Connor Bedard.
Because I was going to say Shane Wright has
Nope.
scored his first NHL goal this week too.
Yes. No. Congratulations, Shane Wright. No, I'm sorry. I meant to be looking towards the future. This is what we're talking about the bottom feeders for. Everyone's racing downwards. Everyone's racing down the standings to get this Connor Bedard kid. Let's talk about him.
Sure.
28 games in the WHL.
Okay.
How many goals?
I'm trying to remember what he was at last week when we did this because that would help.
Yes.
They don't play a lot of games typically, so I'm going to say he maybe added. I think he was at 24 or 25 when we last talked. So I'm going to say he added like 2, and he's like at 26 or something.
27 goals in 28 games.
Wow.
37 assists.
So he has 27 and 37. You just said
64 points in
28 games.
He's on pace to play 66 games. He'll have he's on pace for 64 goals.
Oh my goodness! I just looked up I just saw the numbers. Go ahead.
87 assists, 151 point pace in a 66 game season.
Now, I have one question about this. Is this going to change? Like, is the projection going to change for the part where he disappears for World Juniors because it's coming?
That projection. I believe that projection will change
because he's not going to play 66 games in the WHL when he has to play.
Correct. Also, I think that projection is going to change because I don't necessarily know if he's going to finish the season with Regina. There has been a lot of talk about him getting traded to somebody who can actually who's actually got a shot at the Memorial Cup. Regina is not very good this year. So there's been
somehow with a guy who scores that much.
Well, there's been a lot of talk of potentially trading him to, I believe it's Brandon, because Brandon has the Memorial Cup, so they're definitely going. And the idea is to get him some Memorial Cup experience. So trading him to the team that's guaranteed to get an invite, pretty good bet.
I mean, I get you.
Plus, Regina can set themselves up because the haul they'll get for Connor Bedard. By the way, viewers at home, listeners at home, if you ever want to see some ridiculous nonsense, go look up some CHL trades.
So, okay.
Holy smokes. You've looked, right? Like, you've seen guys go for like 17 picks, including 4 firsts and 3 seconds. And
yep.
CHL trades are lunacy. So it's amazing.
So interestingly enough, though, because you just said something about the thought of trading him to Brandon. Brandon's actually worse this year than Regina is.
Yeah, but they're guaranteed a
spot. Yep. I get it. Now,
if
you were to switch and try to get him to a contender.
Well, it's also one of those things. Is Brandon worse than Regina if Regina didn't have Connor Bedard?
Well, probably. That's fair.
Right. Like, if you took them both off, like, if you took Connor Bedard out of the league, which team is worse? But I get what you're saying.
Like, I'm just out of curiosity. Would you consider moving him to a team that is gonna get there by talent level, and he just enhances their talent? Like,
the idea is to literally get him Memorial Cup experience because he has not played in the Memorial Cup yet in his CHL career.
And it's
his last year. We assume.
Right, I said we all know he's not playing next year. So
right, we all assume it's his last year because the kid is. Here's
a question. Because he's going to get the experience this year, so I guess that makes a difference. But there's a lot of guys this year, like Shane Wright's going to play for Canada in World Juniors because he's still eligible.
Right.
And there's a handful of others that are going as well. Like there's a kid from Arizona.
You've seen a lot of that this year.
Genter's going. Who's the other kid? Brant Clark from LA.
Okay.
Is going too.
Right.
And Canada's going to have a really formidable roster because in addition to the fact that Bedard qualifies as a Canadian player as well, they're going to get Shane Wright back for this. They're going to get
a couple guys with decent NHL
Dylan
experience.
Gensler, and all these players who are NHL level. Like they have 3 players with NHL experience. They're coming back and are going to be better than a lot of the competition because they've played there. Right.
Stop the presses. Canada is going to be good at World Juniors.
Well, in the U.S. will be too, though. The U.S. is going to
That is
have
fair.
because Logan Cooley's going to play.
Is Brant
Uh,
Clark an American?
I thought he might be I don't know. I'll have to check. I thought he was
No,
Canadian.
he is Canadian. He is Canadian. I'm
I
sorry.
was gonna say I saw that he was reporting for that. Yes.
Listen, I do so much scouting for my sim leagues that I get players' nationalities mixed up sometimes.
By the way, another player who is or who will be playing for the U.S. team more than likely is one Flyers prospect, Cutter Gauthier.
We love that.
Have you seen the numbers for him this year? By the way, as a freshman.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't sound as impressive as Bedard's numbers because
NCAA numbers are low.
Well, because Bedard has played twice the number of games. So let's be clear. In 13 games as a freshman at Boston College, which, by the way, Boston College is not like a top program right now. They're like in the middle.
Right.
10 goals, 16 points.
Pretty solid. We love that.
He just had recently a 2-goal, 2-assist game that was like incredible. And he's about to head off to not only participate in the U.S. camp, but he's going to end up being probably a top liner for Team USA and World Juniors. So you're going to want to watch. Like, he's going to play with Cooley and then...
And I'm not sure exactly how old he is, but I'm also willing to bet that if Bobby Brink was eligible and healthy, he'd probably be there too.
I think Brink is not eligible anymore.
I thought he had one more year left. Okay.
No, I think Brink turned 20. So.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk about these bottom tier teams real quick, and then we'll get out of here. Try to keep this a little bit shorter.
So where do you want to go from like this angle? Because Anaheim really is the team that we have to be like everybody's going to be watching for when it comes to the Flyers, because they are the team that is farthest behind and doesn't seem like they're showing any signs of getting anywhere closer.
Yeah, quite frankly, I think the Flyers are going to have a hard time cracking the bottom two. I can see Columbus scratching together enough wins to climb above them. I can see Arizona scratching together, same with San Jose, just because there is some talent on those rosters.
San Jose is only a point back as we talk about this right now, which is easy enough to overcome.
And if
the amount of games they've played,
and if Arizona beats the Flyers in regulation tonight, they're at 22.
Well,
the Flyers are only at 24, and Arizona's got 2 games in hand.
This is another thing about this. Arizona has 3 games in hand on the Flyers and also plays them twice for the rest of the year.
Yep.
Chicago has 2 games in hand, like even for being 6 points behind, which we're saying is a threat. Don't get me wrong. They've got 2 games in hand and 2 head-to-heads against the Flyers.
The problem is Chicago and Anaheim, and I kind of look at those as the kind of the bottom tier by a long shot. Is Chicago has some talent left. They're still holding on to Taves and Kane, but I can't imagine they're both going to be there, after the trade deadline. And then I expect Anaheim is going to cut everything they can loose at the trade deadline also.
No, I actually don't think that's the case.
Oh, you don't think so? I'm not really sure what Anaheim's doing, to be honest with you, because Sonny Milano. Why did we let him walk? Why did we let him walk? Is what I'm saying. Like I just don't know where that franchise is going.
Well, they've got some guys hurt that I don't think they expected to be hurt.
That is fair.
They don't need to do a lot here because Anaheim's already got this year. They've got their first rounder, which is obviously going to be in play for the top spot. They've got 3 second rounders. Now, granted, they're not going to. There's a good chance they won't be great second rounders because you're talking about one from Boston, one from Colorado. So they might be lower tier second rounders, closer to the 3rd round. Then they've got Minnesota's 3rd round pick as well. The only pick they don't have is their own 7th, which at that point, who cares? But you want me to try to pinpoint who could go? I can't see Troy Terry's an RFA, and so is Trevor Zegers, but they're part of the future. They're not going to do that.
If they cut them loose, everyone should get fired.
Would they potentially part ways with a Max Comtois, who's an RFA after this year? Maybe. Well, okay. So here's where you might see some trades happen then. All the following defensemen are all UFAs after this year: John Klingberg, Kevin Shattenkirk, Dmitry Kulikov. And you could eat salary on Shattenkirk and Klingberg.
Klingberg signed there to get traded at the deadline,
but you could eat half of his salary and probably get back maybe another second. To be honest,
I'm convinced John Klingberg signed there so he could spend the first 6 months of the season in Anaheim, hang out in Southern California,
and I could
then
see
get traded at the deadline.
And I could see Shattenkirk getting traded. Now both guys have modified no moves.
And Shattenkirk's been there for a couple years, so I think they're gonna do him right. And well, they're probably just gonna ship him, to be honest.
So Shattenkirk both these guys are movable.
Right.
Klingberg has a full no move clause through January, like through New Year's, and then he's got a 10-team no trade clause until the end of the year.
So he signed there to get traded.
Okay, that's fine. Shattenkirk's got a 12-team no trade list.
The 10-team no move is the 8 teams in Canada, Buffalo, and Arizona.
Maybe. I don't know.
Probably. I'm willing to bet that's a lot of people's 10-team trade list, by the way.
Now, there's 2 other guys on the team that have one more year left after this year that I wonder if they're movable because, again, if the cap goes up, maybe somebody says, sure, I'll do this.
Well, Anaheim's also a bad team with plenty of money. They can also eat salary for a year and a half without too big
probably. Well, yes and no. Because you're right, they have money. But if you're talking about for next year, they have to pay Troy Terry and Trevor Zegras.
That's fair.
And both guys are going to
But they're not going to be. But they're not going to be players for free agency. They're not going to be.
No, they're not.
Any big names. Like their money is tied up.
No, but both guys are going to go from making a combined $2.3 million to
$15 to $20 million. I know.
I wouldn't go that far, but I was going to say both guys are going to make something around the range of 6. I would say 6 to 7 each. So you're talking about 15 maybe.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see Trevor Zegras 9x8.
Oh, 8 years
or
by
8
9,
by 8 by 9. Sorry.
Maybe I don't know. Possible.
Well, and they, you know what? Honestly, they could even go 8 by 10 on them because you're gonna have to overpay people to stay there because they're so bad.
Yeah, but I think Zegras likes being there, and if I look at the injured reserve, for example, by the way, like injured reserve right now includes Jamie Drysdale, who's 20 years old and looks like a stud defenseman in the future, and Isaac Lundestrom, who is a 23-year-old. Who again is right now on the cheap and looks like he's a guy to build around as well. Two
guys under 25 who aren't established players.
Oh, and by the way,
don't turn your team from what it is into.
Oh, and by the way, $2 million a dead cap comes off the books after this year because they were still paying Corey Perry.
Okay, I did know that.
But
so that'll help fray it up too.
But this is the last year of it apparently, so they're paying it and then. So that right now, if you go off of the guys who are not signed, which I believe at the moment there's a lot of them, like within the organization. I mean, obviously, like out of their max contracts, like they have 46 contracts right now. They'd have 25 that are signed through next year, and they'd have $43 million, more than $43 million in cap space with the cap raise of $1 million next year.
Yeah, they're going to be okay.
And then the year after, when it goes to
whatever,
it goes up another $4 million after next year, and then $4.5 million after that, and you're going to be at $92 million come 2025-26. So, just something to keep in mind. But they're a team that I can't wrap my head around in terms of I don't think you start tearing it. That's why I said, do you go so far as to with 1 year left say we'll trade an Adam Henrique or a Jakob Silfverberg?
Oh, I think they would trade those 2 guys.
Right, that's what I mean. Like I'm saying, because I don't like you didn't sign Ryan Strome to trade him. Like he's got too much term left to trade him. I can't see them. I mean, Vetrano's an interesting case because the money's not bad.
Right.
Like $3.65 million when the cap's going up by $1 million and you only have 2 years of term left is not exactly untradeable.
Right.
And then you've got the RFAs. Comtois an RFA after this year. Troy Terry, Zegras, Mason McTavish is on his ELC for the next 2 years after this, and he's a really good player.
Yeah, they've been doing a great job of drafting and kind of bringing guys up slowly.
Right, and then defensively,
they're doing it right.
Defensively, Drysdale's an RFA after this year too that you're going to have to sign, but you probably get the benefit of his injury right now is taking him off the ice, so you're not going to overpay him. Like he'll sign a 3-year deal that keeps him either under club control or for the rest of his RFA years or something.
Yeah, they've done an interesting job in the sense that Anaheim is just now bottoming out when it comes to like the standings and the statistics and all that.
Sure.
But they've got a lot of their rebuild in place already. Like they've got a lot of their young, their new young core in place. They've done a great job drafting. You mentioned Drysdale. You mentioned, all these guys. Troy Terry.
That's why it's an embarrassment of riches if they get Bedard.
Well,
it's an embarrassment of riches if they finish in the bottom, in the last spot, and guarantee themselves either Bedard, Fantilli, or Mishkov.
Yep, and they are one of the teams the Flyers are competing with, and I think that's a good place to wrap us up. So
yeah, I mean,
they are the number one. They are the number one competitor in my book.
I'm just saying. What I'm saying is I'm less threatened by San Jose, Arizona, Columbus than I am Chicago and Anaheim, and yet
that's fair.
And yet those two teams have 4 games against the Flyers combined. That certainly, I mean, this is what we're talking about with the game that's tonight to begin with the Sunday night game in Arizona is. This is where you find out, part of the difference between the Flyers picking ahead of Arizona and not last year was that they won both games against Arizona when it came time to play the head-to-head.
Right.
That's the same situation right now. And Arizona's a tough little team for what, by the way, are you as interested as I am in watching a game that's in a 5,000-seat arena and how it's televised? Because I sure am.
The other night, the Bruins were there, and I turned it on at the start of the broadcast, and Jack Edwards made no less than 3 jokes about it pregame. So
that's a whole nother story.
I assume it was more during. Yeah, we're not going to talk about Jack Edwards jokes, but all right, that's a good place to wrap it. We will be back next week to talk about the small arena experience in Arizona. We will have 3 more games to talk about. We'll have a big old show next week with 4 games, as well as a look ahead, and that will be I think that's our last show before the holidays, right?
Yep.
So all right, make sure you come back one last show before the holidays. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. You can find us anywhere you find your podcast: Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, SportsTalkPhilly.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's just about going to do it. We're looking for 4 losses this week. That's the story. All right. And until then, till next week, we'll see you guys.